Our guest today is Scott Harrison, who's currently the chairman of the school committee and running for your election. Scott, thanks for being with us.
My pleasure.
Happy to have you.
Thanks for inviting me. Happy to be here.
Our pleasure.
So I guess the first question would be, why are you running for re-election?
Well, it's been a very busy 3 years, and there's still more work to do. There's still more value I think I can bring to the committee and bring to the schools in the town of Milford. And what is that value? I think it's continuing to leverage my experience on the professional level, which is working with budgets and finances, and continuing to understand the policies of being understanding the policies and how they impact both the students. I have children in the school system, as well as the teachers. Both my parents are retired school teachers from the town. My sister's a current school teacher in the town of Milford. So I guess you could say it's my family business has been education. We've got so many family businesses in town. Education has been mine, whether it was my parents, my sister who's a current school teacher, my aunt, my uncle who are retired from the Connecticut School of the Blind, to my cousins who just returned from 7 years in teaching in the American International Schools over in Beijing, China. So,
Okay. And what do you see as the issues coming up?
I think there's seeing Woodland through to fruition. According to the state, we're 90% through. It's only in a state project can you be 90% complete with a project when you haven't put the first shovel in the ground. But seeing Woodland through to fruition.
Maybe they meant the design was 90% done.
No, the design's more than that, I can tell you that. But I think that actually just goes to show really how much work actually goes in before we even start to put shovel to the ground. But I think seeing Woodland through to fruition, cruelly a big opportunity, cruelly a big project. Beginning to see what the next step is going to be with Woodland, with Middle School East, and going through the reuse committee, as I had the good fortune of being able to serve on that subcommittee, helping to shape and guide where that's going to go. We're going to continue to see some budget challenges. How do we make sure that we're continuing to give the taxpayer the best bang for their buck, at the same time balancing the needs of the students and the educators and the teachers and the administration? It's a lot on the horizon here.
Well, it's a tough line to walk because your responsibility is an environment where education can safely occur, yet you have to have some consideration for the citizens and tax dollars. So it's got to be a tough line to walk. What's the biggest concern you have? I mean, when you think about the challenges you have, what's the biggest issue that you think you have to deal with? Troublesome issue.
I think one of the big things that we're working through right now is making sure that we are walking that tightrope, and making sure that we are balancing, because you never know until you're looking in the rearview mirror in many cases. Mm-hmm. You don't know whether you walked that tightrope or you fell in the net, in some cases until you're already in the net. Have we put the funding in the right place? One of the things that we're facing right now is we're seeing a growing ELL population in the town of Milford, and it's growing quickly. And that's English, so our English language learners in the town of Milford is growing fairly substantially over the last several years.
You got hit last September with 40 or 50 students you didn't know were coming into the school system.
And we've actually seen in the last 12 months, we've seen in excess of 60 students join the Milford Public Schools that qualify for our English language learning program. In the last 2 years, that number is close to 150. When the state's looking for information, the timeliness of that information, best case scenario, it's a year behind. So the information they have right now and the numbers that we report that the state is working off of from a funding perspective are 2013 numbers. Well, we're in 2000, and that's October 2013. Mm-hmm. By October of 2014, that's 63, almost 70
people out of whack.
Additional students. Well, when you figure the additional cost per student.
There's a ripple effect with those students, though. because if you look at I've heard people challenge the MCAS scores of the Milford school system. People at town meeting have said, well, they're not that great. But in fact, they affect that student population we're talking about has a ripple effect through the years of lowering. It could theoretically lower the MCAS scores if they're less proficient in the English language.
Certainly could. One of the things that I would say that we've seen a lot in Milford is when we have students that join through our English Language Learners program, and we had a whole presentation done by our Director of English Language Learning, Jennifer Lancaster, in November. And one of the things that she talked about, in December, and one of the things that she talked about was when the students come early, when these children come into the schools and they're there kindergarten, first, early elementary, they've graduated out of the program where they're now able to do very well on test scores. They're able to be traditionally functioning students outside of the ELL umbrella, if you will, by 6th grade.
So not much of an effect then.
The impact is not as big. What's the change is, and what we saw this year, was a spike at the high school level. When they show up when these students show up and they're 14 years old or they're 13 years old, so they're showing up in 8th, 9th, and 10th grade, our teachers who do a phenomenal job of being able to educate these children, the turnaround time frame just sets these students up for failure, in my opinion.
Right.
So how do you resolve that issue?
Well, we've got to really kind of do two things. We've got to be able to get the resources in place, because one of the things that we're mandated by the state is you have to have a certain number of English language learning certified teachers. So Milford, and what we've done is, as we've hired new teachers in, either through attrition or through retirement, we've hired in dual certified teachers. Well, it doesn't make it a dual certified teacher doesn't make them two people. It makes them still one person that can serve two roles. Happens very commonly in the business world, where it's, well, I had two managers, now we're going to consolidate it down to one. That doesn't lessen the amount of work that needs to get done. So what we're going to need to be able to do, walking that tightrope, is being able to give additional assets and resources of how do we sort of carve out and Dr. Tremblay to talk about it will even say it's almost like a subset school of our English language learning, where especially when they come in that late. Now, do they have the ability, will they still be able to set themselves up for success? Some of these students may say, we're not looking to be college bound. They may opt out and say, we're not looking to be college bound, we're going to get a certificate of attendance and move on, in which case they wouldn't participate in taking the MCAS. But what we've got to make sure we're doing is we are looking at what the budget looks like. We're allocating the resources to be able to educate these children, by the same time not compromising the students that do speak English, who have been here and have gone through the traditional
And I know you
education as well.
personally are really pushing the state to do some sort of circuit breaker program or provide extra aid to cover these students. Because in reality, if your budget, the budget year starts July 1, you don't know these students are coming, you've got a pretty good idea of the level of population. You start the school in September, and let's say mid-September you get 60 students. You haven't prepared for them at all.
Correct.
In the budget or in the staffing or in anything. So it is a tight walk.
Absolutely it is. And to your point, I absolutely, will continue to push the state and working with our partners and working with our local reps, both John Fernandez as well as of tomorrow, Senator Fatman, as opposed to Senator-elect Fatman. And in working with the new administration that's coming in, saying, guys, we've got to throw up the flags here. I'm a very realistic guy. I live in the real world. I understand where the money is going to come from in the near term. It's going to end up having to come from we're going to end up having to go back to our budget within the town, but that's funded primarily by the taxpayers.
Right.
What I would tell you is it won't be my first stop. That will never be my first stop with this. We've got to make sure that we are going to the state and we are looking to get some help from it. We are going to go making sure that we're throwing up every flag we possibly can to get the support, to try and get some additional support, either through circuit breakers, through pothole money, through pothole programs, to be able to offset not just each year as we go forward, but when there's this influx of students that come in. And that's where the circuit breakers are what comes in as it goes along, when we can plan for it. And Milford's done a great job. We do a very good job when we can plan for things. Emergencies like this is when it gets out of whack in a very quick way.
Yeah.
You know, I know that the regional schools have been hit really hard on transportation. The governor's budget is kind of wacko. Your speculation on budget. I know Charlie is saying he's going to go back to funding that kind of stuff. He wants to go back to that. Do you think that the legislature is going to support that position, or do you think they're going to move away from it?
You know, I'm certainly hopeful that they will be. I think there's a lot of benefit at a municipal level to having a governor as well as a lieutenant governor who are both former selectmen.
Yes.
They've lived in that world. They have felt the very real impact of their day-to-day, of what that looks and feels like.
I don't think most people realize that Charlie Baker, before running for governor, was serving as a selectman.
Yes. So having had now having a governor and a lieutenant governor that have served in that capacity,
Right.
they've lived and felt, and I believe will be a big plus for us at a town level.
Plus, the lieutenant governor, Polito, knows Central Mass area.
Yes.
She's from Shrewsbury,
Right.
so that's helpful.
Yes.
There's some real
So
benefits
I
to
think
that.
there's some help there. Will the legislator let it go through? Because they ultimately have the power of the purse. You know, I know at a local level, the nice part is these guys aren't, they're not living in an ivory tower, hopefully. They still have to go to the grocery store.
Well, the nice thing
And
about
it's different than being in Washington.
it's kind of interesting. I've always told that my local rep, and I've told this to several of them, that the last official in the state of Massachusetts, it still has to look on a day-to-day basis, see his constituents, look them in the eye as a selectman. After that, you deal kind of on a ad hoc basis. You don't really talk to each
And
one.
school committee.
And school committee, but
Well, the nice thing is Senator Fatman has been a selectman, and Representative Fernandez has been both a selectman
and school
and
committee.
school
on
committee
two
member.
different school committees, both BVT and Milford.
Correct.
So you've got a depth of experience there
Yes.
that they listen.
And and by the way, it's not every area that has that kind of benefit. I mean, Representative Fernandez has always been fantastic, very responsive, and I think it's a result of him having been on the school committee and understanding the logistics and the things that you have to deal with. So it's been very beneficial.
Yeah, I think, to answer your question, I am very cautiously optimistic.
That's a good
What I
way
would
to
tell you
start.
is this. I think if any area and any district has an opportunity to be successful with this, it's this one.
Yes.
Because of the resources and all the players that you just talked about and their knowledge base. And quite frankly, I've had an opportunity to talk with John on a number of occasions. I've had an opportunity to talk with Ryan on a number of occasions. We're not dealing with two gentlemen who are wilting flowers and quiet in the back of the room.
That's true. That's true. That's true.
And
If I'm
John,
going to shout from the rooftops about
Yeah.
trying to get help here, I feel pretty good about who's going to be standing next to me and the volume of their
Yes.
voices shouting
Okay.
from the rooftops with me.
well, in addition to that funding issue and those student issues, what do you see going forward in the next 3 years? I mean, we know the middle school reuse committee is tackling that building. Woodland will get built, and I know that it'll have its own unique problems as you transition the kids there.
Right.
Do you see any other major issues that you anticipate tackling?
I I think those are two pretty large ones, in addition to continuing to tackle the funding piece for our ELL
Right.
program, which is growing leaps and bounds. I think the next piece will also be, we've come to the end of and reached sort of the natural conclusion of our long-range education plan. So one of the
Right.
things that I'm very excited about, hopefully being given the opportunity to be a part of, if reelected, is to be part of starting to construct that next long-range educational plan. We've reached the end. The Woodland and Middle School East coming
And that
offline.
really is, it's
That's
been
the end.
almost a 15 to 20-year odyssey.
Correct. Yeah, it's
So it's time for a bold new, where are you going in the 21st century?
correct. So that's one of the things, given the opportunity to serve another 3 years, I do believe that's certainly a very large piece of what this next 3 years is going to be about as well.
No, that's good. Planning for the future is very important. A lot of people don't have the time. A lot of school committees don't have the time or take the time to do that.
You know, one of your major jobs as a school committee member, the by statute job, not the job where everybody calls and says, my kid didn't make this team, or
Right.
I want to change the bus route, but, you know, negotiating contracts, the budget, policy, is the leadership. With Bob Tremblay, you've got now the longest-serving superintendent in all of Metro West.
And one of the longest in Massachusetts.
Which is interesting, because one of the things I read about the problem with education at the local level is the average life of a superintendent is about 24 months these days. And by churning them, towns don't get to have an impact. You've got a guy who's, I think, his 8th year.
Correct.
He's appointed every principal in the system, every vice principal in the system, made a measurable impact on the system. You have confidence in Bob? Do you see change coming in the next couple of years? Do you see continuity? Where do you stand on that?
Certainly. You know, I think Bob does a great job. You know, is he perfect? No, by no stretch of the imagination.
But neither is anybody.
Neither is anybody, right? You know, what I would tell you is this. I think with Bob, he does a great job. He's working very, very diligently. We do have the benefit of that continuity. That 8 years is substantial. We just, through our most recent contract negotiation with Bob, extended him another 3 years.
Okay.
So he's here for at least the next 3 years by our decision.
Right.
Now, what he chooses to do will be up to him, but I have no reason to believe in conversations that I have with Bob, and you know, I do speak with him on a very regular basis, that he's very invested in the town of Milford. So as long as we continue to move the same direction, move this right direction, Bob looks at things the same way that, and one of the reasons why I'm a supporter of Bob's is, I think he and I share similar philosophies of looking for constant improvement. Bob's not happy, and he says when he does his goals, when he gets his review, he looks at things and goes, okay, great, what's next? How can I make this even better? One of the things, and one of the ways that I look at the schools in my professional career, in my personal life, as well as in my elected life, how do we continue to make things better? There's no such thing as good enough. How do we
Right, and he
continue to
certainly
make this
doesn't
better?
believe in standing still.
No, I don't think he knows how to stand still. If lightning were to hit him twice, it's because it's multiple miles away from each other between strikes. So I don't foresee there being a continuity issue, at least at the superintendent level. At least not for the next 3 years, and then you know, as we continue to go forward from
Okay.
there.
So why should I vote for you for election?
That's a good question. That's a good question.
That is a good question.
I mean, I'm
a
the
lot.
average taxpayer. I'm sitting there, whether I have kids in the system or not. Why should I vote for you? In essence, you're asking to be reelected.
Absolutely, I am. I'm certainly being asking to be reelected. And you know, what I would hope is that over the last 3 years, I've been able to prove myself as accessible, somebody who is going to continue to look at the benefits and balance the benefits to the students,
Yep.
the teachers, and the taxpayers. I think very commonly we hear a lot about students and taxpayers. I think the teachers is a population that doesn't get included in that conversation a lot. I'm somebody that has a proven track record over the last 3 years of being very vocal for advocating for all three of those groups and understanding that there's a balance between the three. Continuing to, through that accessibility, work to continue to make things better and continue to work to make good, strong decisions around continuing the education of our children, improving the programs for our students, and continuing to give the resources for our teachers.
Well, you certainly got the facilities. You have a good teaching and administrative staff. If, you know, the finance committee suddenly said to the school committee, hey, guys, we got an extra couple of $1 million we'd bestow on you.
That'd be nice.
Not going to happen, but if they did,
In another life,
what's
maybe.
lacking that you would ask for?
You know, I think one of the things that we do need to continue to look at, what I'd like to see is us continue to invest in how do we continue to get all of our student populations to move up and to move up in there and reaching their full potential. I think we spend a disproportionate amount of time talking about our students that need assistance, as well as our enrichment students. The 80% of the students that don't fall in either of those two categories,
Yeah.
Where I would like to see us go is to offer, continue to offer customized programs that will take these students to that next level. So some things that would go along with that. We've had a pretty expanded robotics program that's continuing to, that started to grow in Milford
Right.
Public Schools. Is that part of enrichment? It is. Is it just for your National Honor Society absolute A students, I'm going to Harvard next year in a full 4-year scholarship? No. These are students that are engineering minded.
Right.
Some of them may go to MIT, but they could be at a local state school as well. So continuing to invest in those types of customized programs. We have I'd love to see us continue to build and expand upon our program for hospitality. I had an opportunity, I was having a conversation with someone the other day that was talking about how, what opportunity would there be to do something on the healthcare side from a unique vocational program on that side.
Right.
On the healthcare side. Is that something that we could entertain? As we continue to do that and look for programs like that that can create a unique educational experience for the students in Milford,
Right.
that's where I'd like to see us continue
You
to
do
go.
have a dilemma, though, because vocational education is really not supposed to be in the core curriculum in the Milford. That's why they have a voc school. So you kind of have to be tricky on how you do that.
But you
Correct.
also have to recognize that BVT is at capacity for the towns, and BVT is so competitive, not everybody that wants to get in gets in.
Correct. And I think part of it, to your point, it's not being in competition. In fact, I think that's actually where it's, if we woke up tomorrow morning, the Finance Committee said, by the way, we can pay for everything and everything's all done, here's an extra $2 million, what do you do? And that's where I think we come up with those creative ways. When we talk about some of those vocational programs, we look at places where, for instance, the hospitality program, when Dr. Tremblay presented this to the committee, one of the first questions I asked was, have you talked to Mr. Fitzpatrick about the fact of, hey, listen, we have a vocational program, why are we looking to do that? That's not something that's being offered there, nor is it something that is a direction that they are looking to go. Great.
Right.
So how do we do that, and how do we
Well,
mix
the
that in?
dilemma is that when because I happen to be on a school committee when ed reform came in, and one of the first things that happened was they took vocational education out of the schools, which I believe was a tremendous error in judgment, because there's a certain amount of education that every school should have. How to use a screwdriver, how to, that kind of stuff.
Actually, you bring up a good point. I mean, one of the things I noticed with having kids of my own in their 20s is the kids today don't. I don't want to paint a broad brush, but I don't see basic fundamentals of things kids need to learn that I don't see them learning anywhere except through their parents. How to balance a checkbook when they go to college or they get a job. How to go and negotiate insurance policy. How to solve some everyday problems that in the old days you sort of had that class built in, not necessarily in home ec, but you had classes in practical things where they taught that. And I know some other public school systems in the state do teach things like, sort of common sense, how to get through life applications of things.
Economics and government were where I went to school, were two mandatory courses that you had to have to graduate. If
Absolutely.
you didn't have economics and you didn't have government, you couldn't graduate. And government was, how does your government work, not the historical.
But I'm talking about even more practical things. I mean, you and I have talked about teach the kids how to apply for a job.
Yep.
I was telling Al jokingly before it, I don't want to embarrass him, but I have a son who's now 24 years old, who when he filled out his first job application as a teenager, went and filled it out in pencil and couldn't understand why I thought that was wrong. And that comes from common sense of my career is bookend with reporter at the beginning and then years in private industry and then reporting again now, where I know what it's like in corporate life. You can't have a kid go and apply with the, even now he's working for an insurance company in the IT field, and I suggested that the insurance company might not accept him the way working for a tech company did, coming in jeans and a t-shirt. They might have a dress code, and sure enough, I get a phone call the night before he starts. They mailed out a dress code to new hires from college, thinking they might not know this.
Right.
But things you and I might take for common sense, a 17-year-old might not have experienced yet. Have you thought of classes like that to teach them practical
Life
things?
skills, life skills.
Some life skills classes.
Life skills.
So a couple of things. One of the things I'm very pleased to tell you is that in Milford, at Milford High School, we have those classes. You talked about the banking piece. My daughter happens to be a freshman at Milford High School. One of the classes she took as her first semester freshman at Milford High School is a banking and investing class.
Wow.
And it taught the basics of, one of the first things she did her first day of school, she came home and said, "Daddy, we need to go to the bank?" And I said, "Okay, we can do that." I think we know where one is. What do you need to get? I need to be able to get some brochures because I need to understand what banks give out to their customers and what type of bank products exist. So she's learning about some of the bank products. They learn about how to write a check, and they learn about how to look at a bank statement and what's important to pull out and why you look at a bank statement. They learn about how do you write some about how you write a check, but also how do you use some of the online banking. How do you use tools and resources. Writing a check, unfortunately, working in that industry for the last 16 and almost 17 years now, the writing of check, unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, is a dying art. We're seeing a dramatic drop in those.
But I'll tell you what's not
is
the kids going to college
yes.
get showered with free credit cards.
Correct.
We'll give you $2,000. And I asked kids this question routinely. Are you big in banking? Let's see if you can do it. You're given a credit card with a $2,000 limit. Because you're young, you charge up to it faster than you planned. And you only pay the minimum payment. When do you pay that debt off?
Oh, it's in excess of 10 years.
It's never.
No, with some of the law changes,
The laws
not to
have
get into
changed.
logistics,
Okay.
but some of the law changes have actually required it, so banks can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other thing
I know
that's,
I'm behind on that, but
the other thing but to your point, that's part of what the banking and investing class will actually talk about as well. So
Good.
I'm very pleased to say that we do have some of those
then
classes
I'm
as
glad
well.
you have those. But things like Al said, how to change a tire, screwdriver.
Yep.
I mean, the simplest thing, and I make this statement very, very cavalierly, but every time I've asked a high school student or somebody, a young person, how does their government work? Explain to me the structure and the organization of your town government. You get this look on their face. Well, I don't know. Well,
Unless you're a Boy Scout and you did your merit badges.
okay, Boy Scouts, there's an exception. But I mean, the scary part about it is that yet here, this particular, the government is the thing that determines a lot of their future, and they don't understand how to they comment, well, that's not a good law, so I'm not going to follow it. Well, that's a nice concept, but how do you go about changing a law? Right. And they don't understand. They can't even tell you who runs the town or where to go for a question. And that's kind of a scary thought because this is the future of our country. And so I'm really, I've always said this, that we need to teach our kids how to be good citizens. Not just how to add, subtract, and spell, but how to be good citizens and what citizenship, contains. You not only get to participate in that, but you need to give back. You need to participate in that government to make it better. And that's the thing that a lot of schools have, forms of school government where the kids participate in runs just like a town.
You do have Mr. Bontempo who teaches the government class.
Right.
Correct. We have a government class. In addition to, we also have president, vice president, secretary, treasurer of each of our classes, as well as we have for our National Honor Society, we have the same officers for National Honor Society as well. So we do have a big piece of that.
Student council, I assume.
Yep,
yeah.
and student council as well. So we do have a student government that is built into that as well.
Well,
Scott, thanks for your time.
thanks, I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you guys so
Thanks.
much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you guys.